This is Gemara Avodah Zarah, Daf Chaf Tas, holding on Chaf Chesem Beis. We pulled up a little bit early. We're middle of going through all the different diseases, all different interesting cures and different ways of treating them. Says the Gemara, or about 20 lines to the bottom. The first one line is V'lekale, V'ledavek. He'll burn it. They're going to apply to the mixture. Says the Gemara, V'seimanech, Retiva, V'veshta, Veshta. The Retiva, moist cures help dry afflictions, and dry cures help moist afflictions. Amar Rabba Bar Zutra, Amar Rav Chanina. Malin Ozdai on the Shabbos, when we raise the ear to the proper position, it has to do with a dislocated jaw on Shabbos. Tani Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Biyad, you have to do with your hand. Avalei Bisam, not using a medicine. There are those that say, says the Gemara, Bisam Avalei Biyad. My time in Mizrav Zarif, because it's going to cause a wound if someone does it with their hand, and therefore it has to be done only with the Sam. Ayin Shemarda, an eye that rebelled, literally. If the eye is swollen and it's going to burst, let it put medicine on it on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, this is only if the herbs have been ground before Shabbos. But to grind the herbs or bring them there, Loi, that would not be allowed. Amar Lehu Mirabanan, Rav Yaakov Shemei. And he says, no. Liditi Mifarshimine, Rav Yehuda explained. Even allowed to grind it and let it bring it through Shesarabim, of course, showing us that they felt it was Saikanas Nefashes. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you a story. Rav Yehuda Charlotte Michal Eine B'Shabbos. Rav Yehuda allowed to put anointments on diseased eyes on Shabbos. Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda says, Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, man says the Yehuda Machal Shabbos. Whoever listens to Rav Yehuda, Machal Shabbos, consider that he was Machalel Shabbos. L'seif Chashveini, the end of Shmuel himself had this disease in his eye. Shalach le'shara, I asked here, he sent to Rav Yehuda, are you allowed to do it or not? Shalach le'kulei alma shari balididach. To you, who asking as such, Aser, it is Aser. Says who? What then is his opinion? What are you supposed to do? Tamar Shmuel, a masa. Says the Gemara, there's a maid servant of a Mar Shmuel. Why became inflamed on Shabbos? She's screaming out and no one's listening to her. And her eye burst. Lamachar, the next day, Nafka. The next day, excuse nothing. Marshmal v'darish ayin shemarda motor lekachla b'Shabbos. My time, what's the reason? Because the shuraini the eye is connected to the heart. So even though it seems like it's only an eye issue, of course it could go to the heart, and that's why it became mutter. They felt it was saikanas nefashes. Kigoin mai, Amar Rav Yehuda kigoin reira ditza dama. For example, excessive discharge, ditzas, having pain in the eye, dama, blood in the eye, dimasa, tearing of the eye, kircha, inflammation of the eye, tchilas ochla, the beginning of the disease, lafuke, saif, ochla, upesucha eine, to prove one's vision, the lie, that cannot be done. It's only because these were potential fatal diseases. Amar Rav Yehuda, zibura, a bee, a hornet to the chazi silva, or skin has been ripped open by a thorn. The simta, someone has a blister, or the kav le'ene, or one whose eye is in pain. V'aisi aliyah ishta, and he has a fever. Kule be bani sakinta, bathing is gonna be not good for them. It could be a sarkana. Chama lechama, radish is a cure for a fever. V'silka letzina, beets for chills. V'chilufa, and the opposite, having the beets and the radish, the opposite disease is sakanta. Chamim lekabra, hard compresses work for a bite of a scorpion. Ukriya lezabira, something cold for the hornets. V'chilufa sakanta. Chamima lesilva, hot water to a thorn. Ukrira, and something cold. As we turn over to Chavtes, Amir Aleph lechas panisa, something cold for facial scabs, the chilufa, and the opposite nachamal is sakanta. Chala lisibura, vinegar after bloodletting, uminuni letainisa, fish after fasting, bechilufa, sakanta. And again, we have to point out that maybe we should point this out numerous times. Of course, we don't necessarily know what these diseases are, what these remedies are, but we certainly believe contemporary doctors. Says the Gemara, Tachli Visibura on the third line of Chavtesa Menal of Sakanta, eating cress before bloodletting is dangerous. Ishta Visibura Sakanta, bloodletting if one has a fever is a sakana. Kaiv Eine, bloodletting when someone has an ayam, Visibura Sakanta. Shani Ledag Dam, bloodletting the second day after eating fish. Ledam dog. Excuse me. Shani ledog is dam. Shani ledam is dog. Shlishi loy sakanta. The third day is going to be dangerous. Tanarabana namak is dam. Someone who gives blood. Lo yechal chagbash. Shnari chagbash. What is chagbash? Explains the Gemara. This is a mnemonic. Lo chalav, like vina, milk and cheese, lo bitzalim, onions, lo shechalayim, nor cress. And if he does, Rabbi, what should he do? Night reviyasa the challah, reviyasa the chamra, a mixture of revius of vinegar and revius of wine, and arvinu. Mix them together by the adali v'nishtei and drink the mixture. V'chimafna. But when he uses the bathroom, loy mifni elo mizracha shalir, make sure you do it on the east of the city. Mishadikasha reicha, for the odor of his stool could cause one to get damaged. Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi malin unkali b'Shabbos. You're allowed to straighten an unkali. My unkali, says the Gemara. Amar Rav Abba is tumka deliba. This is the muscle of the heart. Mayasita. What is the remedy? Maisi kamuna kiruvya. A ladle full of cumin, vininya, and mint, vagadina, and a different type of plant, visitera, and savory, vavadasa, and some grass. You put them all together. Laliba bechamra. For the heart, you mix all these things with wine. V'simanach, remember this is v'yayin yisamach levav enosh. It's good for the heart. Lerucha, for rucha, then b'mayo, you mix these herbs with water. Simanech. Lekuda, for childbirth, you take the same aforementioned potion. What do you do with it? B'shechra, you mix it with beer. V'simanech, v'kada al shechma. Says the Gemara, Ravacha breid Rava, shach le lekulu, he mixed them all together. V'hade adadi v'shakale mole chamish atzbaasa, and he took a fistful of 5 fingers, v'shasile, and you would drink it with liquid Ravashi. Shachi kol chad v'chad l'chudei. He didn't grind them all together. He ground each one individually. Shakam ali etzba'ai, and he took them out, a pinch of each one, a finger's full. Umali etzba'ai zutrasa, a large finger and a small finger, which means a pinch. That's what it means, a small and a large finger. Amar Rapapa and Avdi l'cholani. I did all of these, but guess what? Says Rapapa. Until a certain Arab said to me, you need to take a new jug, and you have to fill it with water, and you have to put honey in it, and you have to leave it under the stars, and the machar, only the next day you could drink it. Ishti, you drink it. Avdi Haki, says Mar Shmuel, and he was cured. Continues the Gemara with various different diseases. Tanu Rabbanan. Shisha Devarim, 6 things. Rabban is a kill a person from his sickness. Rufuas and Rafua, and their cure is permanent. Veluain, Karov, cabbage, trodden beets, Mesis and Yevesha, water of dry pennyroyal, the kivis, and the maw of the animal, the heres, and the womb, the yoseres, like covet, and the diaphragm. Small fish makes one's bodies, mafrin makes one's body strong, makes it whole. Asara Devarim, 10 things, bring a person back to his sickness, kasha, and it's even more severe than it was originally. Ve'ilu hein, says the Gemara, We're about 12 lines from the white lines. First line is V'cholya. Hayachal basar shar, you eat the meat, the flesh of a shar, of an ox, shuman, that's fatty, b'sali, roasted meat, basar, tzipirin, a chicken, peyatzluya, roasted egg, shechlayim, krasik, lacha, shaving, merchatz, a bathing, ukavina, and cheese, v'kavit, and liver, v'yishaymin, afegoizim, nuts, v'yishaymin, af kishuim, cucumbers. Tadei Shemaya, Lamanik, Shman, kishuim, and they, shein kashin, because they're difficult to the body, l'chol gufa shaladam, kicha like swords. And now we go back, quoting the Mishnah, 6 lines from the white lines. You can't take haircuts from the Kaim at any place. A year that takes a haircut from a guy, look in a mirror. If a guy's getting a haircut from a yid, then when it reaches the balarius, that special lock of here of the guy, shamtayas yadai, he should remove his hand, the yid should not cut him off. Cut off that balarius. Amar Mar, Yisrael misar me'akam ra'im emera, hechi dami, how's that ba'asal ibir shesarabim? Lamli mera, why do you need a mirror? We said, Rishram, you had to take a haircut from a guy. V'ibir shesayached, ki raya mayavi, what does it help? Says the Gemara, lo'i lamr shesayached in the last narrow line. But says the Gemara, you know why? It's mutar, kivan di ikamara, since you're looking at a mirror, mechslik adam chashav, you appear like a chashav, a person, and therefore we're not worried that he's going to harm you. Rav Chana bar bizna havi mistaber me'ak bishvili nardai, on the path of nardai. Amar le Chana yoyi kuyich lezuga. Chana, your throat is appealing to my razor. Amar Chana said, Tasty davdi ad Rameir. He said, I'm deserving of such a punishment because I was over in Rameir getting a haircut from a guy. Vad Rabbanan lo yaivir, is only Rameir. Aim the Rabbanan versus Ram. Yachan mi Amar. Everyone else it's aser. He thought that the paths of Nardai had a din similar to Shesarabim. You have to stop the haircut. Says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom. How much you have to leave over of such a hair? 3 fingers around this lack of hair of the guy that's glorious. The halacha of a shvut, a spit, the maid servants and pores, Rav Malkaya, he was said by Rav Malkaya. Boreas Ephra Malka, but Gavina was Rav Malkaya. So 2 different people. I'm trying to remember who said which halacha. Amar Abba Masninon, Umasnita Rav Malkaya. Shemaitza is Rav Malkaya. Simani Masnita Malkasa, my Benayu, Kimenayu, Shvachis. That's the one chilek between the 2 ways of remembering the case. We turn over to Chavtasim Beis and we begin a new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Elu Dvarim, these are the things. Shalakum Asuran, Visuran, Isra, it's usher from a guy and it's usher in benefit. Hayayin Vachayim, it's wine and vinegar, Shalakum Shaya, Metchilasan, Yayin, vinegar, that was initially wine, Vacheres Hadreni. Cheres Hadreni, which we'll see what that is. It's a flask that the guy used to soak up wine. Va'iris Lavuvin, heart, skins, Rashbagoimer, Bizman, Hakrei, Shakare, Shaloi, Ugul, Aser. If the incision is round, it's Aser. Mashach, it's going to be Mutter. Continues the Mishnah. Basar Anichnas Avodah Zarah, the meat that's being brought to Avodah Zarah, but the yid stops it before it goes in. Mutter. V'hayoytei, but that which goes out already was by the Avodah Zarah is Aser. Mibnei, Shukaziv Chaymesim Devi Rabbi Akiva. Halcham the true face. Aser, someone who's going on the way to an Avodah Zarah, Lasis v'Lasis Himayan, you're not allowed to talk to them in business. V'habayin, those who are coming back after they went to their Avodah Zarah, then mutarim. And again, the Gemara will explain the difference being, as we saw in the very beginning of the Masechta, are they going to be mashbiach to the Avodah Zarah, whereas once they're leaving, it's over. Noidei sa'akum, the leather flasks of the Goyim, Vakankinim, and their jugs, V'yayin shel Yisrael, Kanas Behem, wine of a Yid was kept inside of it. Asurin v'Yisuran Isser Hana, Divi Rabbi Meir, Of course, this is a topic that it's the home. Siyata Dishmaya, anyone that wants a copy of the Sefer written many, many years ago, Wine, Whiskey, and Halacha, in which we deal with these shaylos. This is the crux of the whole Shari Cask shayla. This is the crux of all Stam Yenam. Please reach out and we will send you a copy of the Sefer. Hachartzanim, grape seeds, vahazogim, grape peels, shalakom, asur and visur, and anod devira meir. And again, just to point out, the reason why all these things are usur is that the stam is that the wine of a guy was utilized in Avodah Zarah, etc. And the moist ones are also yivation and mutter. Hamurius and ugvinas and the cheese of Besu Nike. Shelakom asur and visur and anod devira meir v'chacham and meirim ben yisur nisrano. Amar Rav Yehuda Shal. Rabbi Yishmael as Yeshua Kshem Halcham Aderech. Rabbi Yishmael asked the question to Yeshua when they're traveling on the road. Amar Loi said to him, Mipnei Ma'asru Gvina Isakom. What is the reason? The Gvina, the cheese of a guy is aser. And now we're segueing from Stam Yinam into other gezeras of the Gayim. Gvina Isakom. Amar La, you know why? Because the cheese is made in the keva, the rennet of a non-kosher animal. Amar La, kevas oila chamura mikevas nevela. What do you mean the rennet of an oila is more chamur than the rennet of a vela? Amru kayin. Shadaita yafas arvachai, a kayin who's not squeamish may eat it raw. However, they did not agree. However, they said, you cannot get any benefit, but malin is not considered me'ilah if it is utilized. I'll give you another reason. Shmamidin ois bekeva oisa bekeva's egle avodas chavim. They curdle it in the rennet of the calves of Avodah Zarah. Amar loyim kein lama loy asur b'hana. Shvivin asur b'hana. Hesiul l'davach. Rav Yisi went on to another topic. Amar loy Yishmael echat akayri. How do you read the second pasuk of Shir Hashirim? Ki toivim daidecha miyayin. For your love is better than wine. Or ki toivim daidech. Or does it mean daidech, referring to Klal Yisrael, is better than wine? Amar lai. Ki toivim daidech. Referring to Klal Yisrael. Amar lai. Ina davar kein. No. Shrei chaver melamed alav. The next pasuk teaches us that it's not in the feminine, but rather it's in the masculine. L'reach shemanecha toivim. Whereas, therefore, we know it's not referring to Klal Yisrael. Says the Gemara, okay, let's start delving into all the different halachas of our Mishnah. Yayin min Allah, how do we know wine of a guy that was utilized in libations of Avodah Zarah? How do we know it's Asar? Amar Avu Amar Kra. Shacholav zavchimu yochlu yishtu yayin asicham. From here we learn now, ma zevach, just like a carbon of Avodah Zarah is Asar b'hana. Afeinami asur asur behana. Zevach gufei minali. How do we know that to sacrifice themselves of Avodah Zarah asur dechsev? Veisamdu lebal pa'ar v'yechlu zivchei meisim. They attached themselves to Baal Pa'ar and they ate the offerings of the dead. Ma mace asur bahana, just like a mace is asur bahana. So the fact that it puts it next to meisim, af zevach nami asur bahana. Umeis gufei minalin, step 3. Asya shem shem me egla rufa. Ksiva chavatama shamiriam. Uksiva sam erba shames agola benachal malhalan azmanav kanami asr behanav hasam minalin. And the final step, and where do we know by egla rufa is step number 4 that it's asr behana. We started with the ayin of Avodah Zarah. We went to karbanas of Avodah Zarah. We went to a mace, and now we're going to egla rufa. Amrid ve'Ravyane kapara ksiva kikachim. Therefore, just like karchim, will be the same halacha. V'achaymet shalakum shayam mitchilasa yayin. The vinegar of a guy that originally was wine and then it turns to vinegar is aser. Says the Gemara, pshita. This is pashit. Misham de'echmet pakale yisura. When it was wine, it was aser b'ana. So even now, when it's vinegar, it's certainly aser b'ana. Amar Avashi. Hasash, meaning knows coming to teach us, Chaimesh Shalanu biyad akum, ein sareh chaysam b'sei chaysam. If our vinegar is in the hands of a guy, it does not need a double seal, meaning because at the stage of vinegar, it's not called wine anymore. If we're worried they're going to pour Avodah Zarah, they don't pour vinegar. And if you're worried that they're going to swap it, if one chaysim would be enough. So the chiddush of the Mishnah, by teaching us that the chaymitz of a goy that was wine is aser, shows us the reason is because it was wine, but once it turns into the stage of chaymitz, it's a different entity. Amar Ravillah, 6 lines to the bottom. Sheninu yayin mevushal shalakum, shaymentiklas yayin aser. If there originally was wine of a guy, and then it was a mivushal, then it was cooked, it's still us. Says Marvshita Avodah. Again, be careful. Of course, yayin mivushal is not the same din. Here we're talking about yayin of a guy that was aser. Then you cook it, it's not going to make a mutter. Says more Avodah, that's Pashut. The Chiddush is yayin mivushal shalanu. If we have wine that was mivushal, that was cooked, then why? You don't pour yain b'vushal Avodah Zarah. Now this is a hot topic. What is the reason? The reason is because it's a low form of wine. That's a big kash of our wines that are pasteurized, the same thing. V'imi sham, as we turn over to tomorrow's Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, says the Gemara. V'imi sham echlufe kivadik chaysam echad loy tarach umezayif. They would never be mezayifit, and therefore, once it's mavushal, it could then be in the hands of a guy. Of course, what it's called mavushal is a hot topic. We'll stop over here. I'll pick it up from here. B'siyata dishmai.